Let's bring in ABC News papal contributor and consultant to the Vatican, Father James Martin, for more on this. Father Martin, thank you for coming on. And first of all, my condolences to you. I know that you knew Pope Francis, so I know we have you on as an expert, but you also lost a friend this morning.
Yeah, it's sad. I was woken up by a fellow Jesuit in my community, and I thought he would pull through, actually. But he's someone who really wanted to work till the end. He was a kind person, very human, very funny when you're with him, but also a hard worker and a little stubborn in terms of not wanting to just rest in bed. He really wanted to be with the crowds, as you saw yesterday on Easter.
I think they said 2 months that he was supposed to rest and not be out among the crowds after coming home from the hospital just a few weeks ago. You say that if we had put it in a book, no one would believe it. That for the Pope to pass just hours after making this appearance at Easter Sunday Mass.
It's amazing, and the beautiful timing on God's part. And my sense was that he celebrated Easter yesterday with the faithful, and he's celebrating with Jesus Christ today in heaven. So it's a lovely Easter Monday for him.
What was your reaction when you heard the news?
Surprise, real sadness. I'd come to know him not as well as others, of course, but I'd spent time with him one-on-one over the last couple of years, and he was just a lovely guy. He was charming and funny and very supportive of me personally, and just a great guy. I think people will remember him not only for his policies and his encyclicals, but just being a great guy. I think that people felt really warm towards him personally.
You have written extensively on the Church's approach to LGBTQ+ issues. Pope Francis famously said, "Who am I to judge?" when asked about a purportedly gay priest. Why do you think that response got so much attention? Why was that such a significant moment?
Because a lot of people expected him to judge. And I think even though the Gospels have Jesus telling us, "Judge not," I think people sort of expected that from him and expected a stronger, in a sense, condemnation. But Pope Francis did more for LGBTQ people, I think, than all of his predecessors combined. He's the first pope ever to use the word gay in public in that interchange that you're talking about. He had gay friends. He met regularly with transgender people. So he wanted to sort of show them his pastoral outreach and his love. So it's pretty extraordinary.
That said, he did also say that it's a sin, right? And it's sort of that, I think, serves as one example of the many ways that on difficult issues he sort of walked this line. What did you make of how he handled that throughout the course of his papacy on not just LGBTQ+ issues, but many others as well?
What he wanted to do was really sort of promote pastoral outreach to different groups of people, but he also wanted to keep the church together. I remember he said during the Synod, this worldwide gathering of Catholics, that unity is more important than conflict. And so there are some places in the church that aren't ready for example, women deacons or same-sex relations, those kinds of things. And so what he was trying to do was to show people that we can treat people like individuals, rather than just stereotypes or ideologies or groups, right? He wanted to deal with the person, the individual, culture of encounter, he would call it.
He was also the first Jesuit pope. How do you think that affected the way he went about his leadership and his legacy now?
Well, speaking as a Jesuit myself, I'm a little biased, but I think that he's the first member of a religious order in centuries that many took a vow of poverty, so he's used to living very simply. But the Jesuit hallmark, I think, is one of freedom. For example, it didn't really bother him when people attacked him or disagreed with him. So he had this great sense of interior personal freedom that allowed him to do a lot of things that I think people would have thought were impossible before.
Jesuits also don't, or aren't supposed to at least, purposely seek big leadership positions. So how do you end up with a Jesuit pope, the highest of them all?
I'm laughing because there's a funny joke that the president of Fordham said, which is a humble Jesuit, an oxymoron, a Jesuit pope, an impossibility, a humble Jesuit pope, a miracle. We take a promise not to strive for these things, but sometimes we're appointed to these offices, and he was regional superior, or called provincial, of the Argentine province of Jesuits, and was made archbishop, and he sort of accepted that, but he never strove for that. He was never seeking that, and he was certainly never seeking to be pope, which meant that he was very free and very relaxed in the job.
You also talk about a vow of poverty, and he did say that he wanted a poor church and a church that is for the poor. He led by example in many areas. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of how he chose the guest house instead of the lavish papal residence, the clothing he wore, the car he was in. What sticks out to you about how he led by example in that way? And then how do you think we now appropriately honor this man who led the Catholic Church with a funeral that is worthy of the Pope, but also honoring his desire for a more humble life?
Well, I think that's a good way of putting it. He led by personal example. He lived very simply himself. At the same time, he also drew our attention to the poor, right? So he was always reaching out to people in the margins, particularly migrants and refugees. One of his first visits was to Lampedusa, an island that had many refugees. So he lived simply. He asked us to live simply. Interestingly, he simplified papal funerals, so we're not going to see as lavish a papal funeral as before. How do we honor his legacy? I think by honoring the Gospels, which is Jesus asking us to be with our brothers and sisters who are on the margins, who are poor and sick and who are the strangers. So it's living the Gospels that we can most effectively honor Pope Francis's legacy.
Among the many unique qualities of Pope Francis, you can't ignore how he came to be the Pope, with Pope Benedict still alive and well and there in the Vatican, right? The first Pope to retire in 600 years. What do you make of their relationship and how different this conclave will be?
That's another good question. I think that they had a very warm relationship. It was it was very unusual, as you said, first time in 600 years. Pope Benedict, for the most part, kept silent. There were a couple times that he had writings come out or people quoted him saying something. And Pope Francis had said that he looked upon Pope Benedict as like a grandfather, someone he could go to for counsel. And by all accounts, they had a very warm relationship. So I think he saw him as a resource at the Vatican. But it was quite unusual.
Well, and you know, Pope Benedict known for his Prada shoes, and then you have Pope Francis known for, you know, the opposite in so many ways. These two leaders together, feet apart.
Well, we have the example of St. John Paul, for example, who decided not to retire. We have Benedict, who retired. We have Pope Francis, who did not retire. And I think what you see is different men, in this case, surrounded by or sort of confronted with the same kind of decisions. And they just take different approaches to it. So one wears the shoes, one doesn't wear the shoes. I think it doesn't mean that one's holier than the other. It just means they, you know, for each of them, different things worked.
Some are also pointing to the similarities between Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis in the way that they still continued to make public appearances even as their health deteriorated. So, you know, one can make the decision to be more private about that. They really showed that side of them. And we saw Pope Francis, I mean, demonstrate that with his last public appearance just hours before his death. How significant do you think that is?
He's showing us that we're all human, we all have bodies, we all get sick. And so I think it was a desire for him to, you know, remind people of that reality, but also it was just, he was a hard worker. I mean, I knew him a little bit and I saw how hard he worked. And I think it is just as much a kind of spiritual message as a sort of practical message. He just wanted to work until the end, and he did.
He sure did. All right, ABC News Papal contributor, Father James Martin. Great to have you, Father. Thank you.
My pleasure.